So welcome everyone to the Highland Park Historical Society rescheduled March presentation with Dr. Wayne Duerkes. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Duerkes to tell you about his research and his background and what he's going to be presenting to us this evening. I'm going to mute myself and let's come back for questions.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Wayne Duerkes. I'm calling from Peru, Illinois tonight. What we're going to be talking about tonight is what I consider to be a very overlooked entity in many libraries, archival repositories, libraries, what have you, and that is the financial records of the 19th century. As I was saying earlier, a lot of these day books and ledgers and cash, all that, it becomes one of these things that when many people visit an archive and they see these, it becomes a very daunting task as far as what to do with this. How do I extract information about my community, about people, about anything else that's going on at that time? Um, and I'm going to give you kind of the basics tonight on how to do this. Uh, Most accounting practices in the 1830s and 40s um, were somewhat standardized, but not necessarily. In the farther west you got in the United States, there was more of a free for all attitude when it came to how to run their books. The accounting of today just did not exist back in those times. Many of the merchants, store owners, clerks, what have you, they wanted to make sure that they were being dutiful in making sure that they're capturing all the transactions. And as you'll see, it is definitely not what we have today with computerized and Quicken and all that kind of fun stuff. The first thing that we need to talk about when utilizing these is how much of it do I want to use? This becomes something that is quite a debate in historical communities because some people like to cherry pick. They'll take a section of the ledger or the day book, a month or a week or maybe 1 year if they're productive, so that they can kind of get a snapshot of what is occurring in this community or with the store, what have you. Um, and because some of these day books are very large, I appreciate that. What we're going to see tonight, though, is this day book that we're going to focus on. I'm utilizing the entire thing. It's just kind of that OCD in me that wants to access all the information humanly possible, and you'll see later on that that is a very good thing because the individual had some financial difficulties, and if you only picked a part of it, then you might miss the startup or the financial difficulties or what have you. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. It's just, it's for me, I like having it all. So we're going to go ahead and start by kind of talking about different kinds of account books that existed back in this time. I think most of them still exist to this day. Most of them are computerized, but at this time frame, things were much different. So the first is the standard day book, as you see here. And now, and this is a page from William Seeley's store out here in LaSalle County. And what these day books are is when they started the day, they'd put, whatever date it is, January 9th, March 10th, what have you. And then as each customer came in, they would go ahead and log down. John Doe got flour and nails or what have you, and they just listed this throughout the day so that they knew the total number of transactions that occurred that day, and they could kind of get a guide for what was occurring day to day in their individual store. Now, a lot of this is kind of hard to read, and I appreciate that. But when you're going through these day books, after a while, the writing will become very common to you. You'll get a feel for the author's writing style. And there really becomes this thing of understanding some of the simple lingo that is utilized in this. So, like here, circled in blue, you'll see for, or let's see what we got here. We got for, to, and dr. These are all indicative of when someone is actually purchasing something. So John Doe is purchasing that bag of flour, and so this is money that is owed, right? Now we'll get into what if they buy it right then and there. That's another thing, but these are really key. This becomes you're creating the debits that will go into the ledgers. Also, credit or by is indicative of money that is coming into the store, right? And it could be by cash, it could be by trade goods, what have you. And this is going to create your left and your right side of your account book that you know very well today. One of the other things you'll see occasionally, you'll see, well, what's 20? What does that mean? Well, that just means the 20th day of that particular month. They usually don't just throw a number in there for no valid reason. And as you go through the ledger, you'll see that the next day is the 21st, 22nd, and so on, as far as that goes. And then we have this very interesting little mark here. It's in pencil, and it looks like it's been crossed out, and it actually absolutely has. You're going to see these throughout the cash books. Sometimes they do like the X you see there. Sometimes they'll do a slash through it. Sometimes they'll do a number sign through it, and they're almost always in pencil so that they can still see the transaction underneath. And I'm going to explain what that is here in a very quick minute. The next kind of book that you're going to come across is the ledger book. And here's Peter Hummel's ledger book. And what the ledger book is, this is a relationship with the day book that's very important. So in the day book, they're marking down each customer as they come in, what they're doing. And then what they'll do is they'll take, like in this case, Mr. Easterbrook, and they'll put the date he came in and the transactions he did. So that obviously to go through the entire day book to find all his transactions when he's ready to settle up would be quite cumbersome. So they do this with a ledger book so that, when he does come in to pay, they can go straight there, they can total it up quickly, and they can take care of business. Now, once they take the day's transactions and process them into the ledger book, they go ahead and they put that pencil mark that I was talking about over that, indicating the data has moved over to the ledger book. So it's very, very key to see that. And if they don't have it, usually if you're talking about a small merchant that has maybe less than 50 customers, they might be sharp enough not to have to worry about that. But so ledger is a component. Now, in some of the books, the day book is in the front, the ledger is in the back. It all depends on the amount of customers that the
Historical Society
particular merchant is dealing with at the time. And then sometimes if you have a lot, like we're going to be talking about, the ledger book is entirely separate. Another type of financial book is cash books, right? So here's Simon Crozier's book, Cash Book. And cash books are usually not necessarily with your standard general store merchants, what have you. They're usually with bigger outfits, land offices, government entities, individual buyers, forwarding and commission agents that are buying large amounts of either hogs or grains or what have you. Sometimes cash books are really hard to work with because you're not really sure what's associated with any one of the individual entries. If you have a complete set of books from in a merchant, a cash book might come into play there, but they're few and far between, to say the very least. Now, other things can happen in day books, and we're looking at William Noble Davis's here. And what's interesting about Mr. Davis is he was a contractor on the I&M Canal, and most contractors also owned a store. And Mr. Davis was absolutely no different here. He has his transactions going on. And if you look at the left side here, those are his canal workers. So if you look at the records, you can find where Davis was working over in Kendall County, Kendall/Grundy County, on his individual section. So you can find the workers that he had paid. Because a lot of the times what was happening is just kind of like the old coal mining, shall we say, where you were paid through store credit. Obviously, most people wanted cash, but sometimes store credit was the way to go. So this is a way of kind of nailing down a portion of that workforce that worked for Mr. Davis. Other data that you can get from this depends on how insightful the individual merchant was. Like in this case, you can see this James here. He was buying pork and he was buying flour. Well, those are buy prices. So you can get a feel for that area, how much pork was going, how much flour was going, corn, whatever they were selling per se. Early, like in 1837, 38, as you see here, there were no local newspapers. So there's no way of tracking buy prices without the aid of day books and what they're indicating as far as potential buy prices. Now, it doesn't mean that was the standard for the area. He could have had a deal working with some of these individuals that he got it cheaper, but at least it gives you a feel for where you're headed to. Now, the next book, Grist Mill Workbook. These are really exciting. This is William Seeley's. We looked at a page of his day book earlier. And what this is the transactions that occurred at his grist mill. Now, obviously, looking at the top of the runners there, you have the number of bushels, you have the pounds, you have the kind, right? Was it wheat? Was it winter wheat? Was it spring wheat? Was it bran? What was it, right? And then how much was turned into flour? How much was left as brand? Because the brand obviously was sold at a different price later on. So you're able to get a handle of just how much grain these individual grist mills were processing, and Mr. Seeley's is quite incredible. Now, if any of you are old mill people and know what's happening here, this is the column that a lot of us are debating about now in the mill preservation societies. You see 15, 33, 36, 33 and a third, 32. I've heard multiple interpretations of what this means. None of them match, unfortunately. And I'm assuming the little check mark, you see the little number sign after it, that is indicative of what they transposed over to the individual ledger book. I don't believe that means pounds in any way, shape, or form, because obviously the stones were much heavier than anything like that. And plus, they would rarely change stones from pound to pound. So I don't think that's what it is. So if you know, please let me know. But the day book we're talking about is this gentleman named Conrad Seabaugh. And Conrad Seabaugh is a very interesting character, and we've learned a lot from his day book for many reasons. First off, it is a huge book, 629 pages. It goes from the opening of the store to the close of the store. Now, we know this because during this time frame, merchants were required to get a permit to have their stores, and he got his permit like on May 12th, 1836, and then shortly after August 6th, because he did one in May of 1838, and August 6th, all his contracts, all his land was sold. So We are looking at his store from the day it opened basically to the day it closed. All the transactions are in there, so that makes it very nice. And believe it or not, for those of you who have looked at a lot of 19th century documents, Mr. Seabaugh and his clerk, they had very nice handwriting. It's relatively easy to transcribe. And this was very important for someone like me with my old eyes, because sometimes these are real difficult to go with. Now, to kind of put this in kind of Illinois perspective so you know what's happening here, obviously back in this time frame, the county borders were quite different. LaSalle County still had parts of Grundy and Kendall and what have you as a part of it. And LaSalle County was economically tied to Chicago. And that's really important as far as the amount of customers that are coming through on account of the canal, which was still being built at the time. And so Seabaugh was down here in LaSalle in Ottawa, which makes him kind of an interesting story to talk about. Because in Seabaugh's time, we're talking about the late 1830s. The map on the left is a canal planning map, and you will see running kind of long ways with a little island, or the bigger island there, that is the Illinois River, and then shooting up perpendicularly from it is the Fox River. And that black circle there, where you see section 11, that is where Ottawa is at the time. Now, Mr. Seabaugh, if you look also on that same map on the left, up in the upper right, you'll see section 166. That is the section of the canal that he was the contractor for. So he had workers that dug on that canal, and some of them had potentially had accounts, with the store for payment, and it wasn't too far from his place of work. If you look to the right of that, the hand-drawn map from 1838, and I don't know can you see my mouse, anyone? If so, once again, you have the Illinois River, you have the Fox River here, and it's not to scale, obviously. Here's the public square. There is the LaSalle County Courthouse, and Mr. Seabaugh's is in this two-story building that's surrounded by the black circle. So as you can see, he's close to both rivers. He's close to the public square. He's close to two different ferries, the ferry on the Fox River and the ferry on the Illinois River. And he knew about location because his father, back in Pennsylvania, also selected a very similar location in their community, by the public square, by the courthouse, near the river, and near a canal. So his father was quite successful out there, and so he took what he knew and he brought it out west. This makes him a very interesting character, especially compared to some of his colleagues at the time. Now, here comes the part that most people don't enjoy doing. They have to transcribe this, right? This is the easiest way to do it. And at the top, you see a section of the day book. And because his day book was from start to finish, I was able to recreate the ledger down at the bottom. And I'd like to point out some things. Obviously, we have the page, the total number of transactions throughout the entire book. He had a little over 5,500 transactions in this time frame, so he was quite busy. And then we have the month, the day of the year, the individual that did the transaction, how much the debit was, and he did fractional. And I just found it easier to do an additional column to do the fractionals by themselves. Then, of course, credit friends, transactionals. And I also included this loan cash, right? The banks that existed during this time frame in 1837, 1838, especially in the West, they weren't all over the place by any stretch of the imagination, and they were wildcat banks. They could be of quality today and garbage tomorrow. So it was much more palpable to most customers and to merchants to go ahead and loan cash, where that would be an actual debit for them. And you see in this one case that Conrad Seabaugh himself took a loan from the store for $6.75, which is really interesting when you total it up. Who are his cash customers? How much he's loaning? Very interesting information. It's also important here that with the credits, I went ahead and notated how the store was getting their money. Was it by cash? Was it by trade? Was it by services? And you'll see why that all comes in together later. And obviously, you're only seeing an excerpt here with 5,500 of them. I went ahead and did them all. It took several months to get it in, and I was working full time and going to school. But once done, the nice thing about Excel is you're able to manipulate this data for interpretation purposes, and you really get an outstanding sense of what's occurring here. Now, in the recreated ledger, if we look down at the bottom part here, you'll see that Ralph Woodruff had the most transactions, 257. His total debt, his total credit, how much he owed the store owed him, what his average debit was, what his average credit is. And this is all data that we're going to use later in the interpretation aspect of it. I also, if I could find the data utilizing census and county history books, what have you, I put in what township he was from, what county, if they had an occupation, put that in. And what's exciting about this is LaSalle is a very large county, many townships, and from this you can get an idea of the reach that this store had. Mr. Seabaugh had access to every township. He had customers from every township, and neither the Illinois River or the Fox River deterred people from coming to him, which is exciting. We also people in Livingston, people in DeKalb County, what have you. So once again, it just gives you a feel for how broad this guy's reach was. Once all this data is in, the fun begins, shall we say. First off, you want to get a feel for how many customers this guy has and how many transactions they're doing. So in this particular graph, you see the number of transactions grouped on the left, how many customers are within that group. So obviously Woodruff would be the 200 plus, and then the percentage of the total. Now, 558 total customers. It doesn't mean a lot by itself until you look at the other stores in the county where we have data from. The average of the 14 books during this time frame was somewhere like 36, 37 customers. So 558 unique customers in this small time frame is astounding. It really gives you a feel how important Seabaugh's operation was to the community. Now you'll see right above that 558, there's 123 or 22% of his customers are only there once. And, we have some, politicians coming through. We have Army captains coming through, people that are probably on their way further west or north or south, what have you. That is, shall we say, kind of normal because of his location. If you're coming up to do work or you're there for a court case, what have you, for the entire district, those may be your one or two customers. But this gives you feel that Seabaugh & Company was a very huge operation in LaSalle County by far. Other data that can be extracted from this takes a little thinking here for a little minute, but obviously people had accounts there. But there were also other people that came in to do business at Seabaugh's. So of the 5,500, you'll see that 819 down here at the bottom were transactions conducted by someone else for someone's account. So at the top, you'll see 125. These were picked up by other people that were informed ahead of time, and then 309 by other people at the time of transaction. So what the top one means is if you did work for me, I would go into Seabaugh and say, hey, Jim's coming in. He can charge up to $14 on my account. Great. That's what those people are. The next one is maybe I came in with Jim, or Jim had a letter, what have you. I was, for some reason, I wasn't there. That's what those people are. That is payment, right? That is how they got their paychecks. They didn't get paid in cash some of the times. Transactions that were in of an exchange methodology was predominant in the Illinois frontier. So a lot of these individuals would do work for other farmers or other merchants or carpenters, what have you, come in and get payment there. Business partners, 38 transactions there. This one, lady, that's an exciting one for me, 176 total transactions, and they come from a handful of ladies. Now, because he is very good about listing relatives that are females, most of these ladies are working for professionals, right? Lorenzo Delano was an attorney in Ottawa. He had the Fox River Hotel. So he would send a lady to go to the store to pick up whatever they needed, flour, linen, what have you. Also, obviously, family members would come in. As you can see, more male family members came in than female members. And then a lot of workers were boys and girls that weren't related to the account, but just like lady, they went to the store to purchase on behalf of the account holder. So if you think about this, these 819, they only represent 17, almost 18% of all the debit transactions. So a vast majority of the customers coming in were the account holders. But only 4.6 of those were made by females, which it seems extremely low, but depending on where you're at the time, 4.6% female transactions is kind of high. Obviously something I don't believe in, and thank God we've gotten past it. But sometimes most men thought that, women had no place being in there by themselves. So, it would be one thing if the wife was with the husband did the transaction. They wouldn't even notate her presence. But in this case, there was actually almost 5% females could go in and actually do business on someone else's account, which is kind of progressive at the time. This, I think, is one of the most important graphs that we were able to come up with when I did this data. Obviously, as you can see from my transcription of the whole thing, the credit range, right? When people were paying their bills, when they were coming in with cash, with goods, what have you, and a dollar value was assigned to it, I grouped it into these individual groups. And it's this group here, the 1 cent to $5, that group, almost all of it, like 99.8% of it, was all petty commodities. Now, petty commodities like feathers, ash, eggs, milk, butter, also sewing services, washing services, were all in this. Petty commodities were under the realm of the females, which is very important. So despite the fact that only 17 women had their own accounts, which was kind of impressive, just 0.3% of all the account holders, almost 50% of all the money coming into the store was generated by the work that women did. Okay. Yes, women also did work on the farm with harvest and planting and all that kind of stuff. But almost 50% came strictly from women. That really kind of focuses that lens on the extremely important role that women had in the West at the time. They weren't just barefoot and pregnant and cooking and cleaning. They played a very pivotal role in the agricultural ladder that was occurring at that time frame. And what I mean by that is you got to remember most men were focused on the harvest, right? They were either doing the harvest or the slaughter as far as making their money. So their transactions were done at specific times in the year, selling off their wheat, selling off their corn, selling off the hogs or the cows. And in between those events, it was the women's work that was coming in on a weekly basis, if not even more, that was providing to pay off some of this debt, to provide for other foods that they couldn't get a hand on. So if anyone still believes that women weren't that important back then, this is actual numeric proof that that is horse hockey. Other stuff that can be ascertained from some of this, and I only gave one example here, is you can trend out buy prices. So for, in this case, oats per bushel. So if you looked at what he was paying for oats throughout the time frame, you can kind of see that he kind of was hovering around that 50 cents per bushel aspect, and you could compare that to what was happening in Chicago and St. Louis. And you can attempt to look at, like, you'll see that dip down to 40 cents a bushel, September 12th, 1837. I was not able to ascertain why they were, maybe there was just a huge harvest going on at the time and the market was flooded with oats, who knows? But you can do this with almost any product that was occurring at that time that he was buying and or selling. Now, the thing that you have to watch with that is, you have to take it that it's consistent. The product is consistent. So some people say, well, you could track linens in that. Well, not necessarily, because linens come in different shapes and sizes and fabrics and all that. So one may not be the same as the other. But, for buy prices for butter and milk and all that kind of stuff, you can do this with that. And it gives you a real sense of what's occurring in the community. Big picture, you need to kind of get a feel for, okay, if he was there from 36 to 38, what was going on? What happened? Why did he close out at 38? So if you look at his monthly business activity with the days of transaction, you'll see that, when he opened up in May 1836, things started kicking off really good. But about November of 37, you can see a decided trend line heading to the south, right? So what occurred during that time frame? Well, nothing specific happened in November at Seabaugh and Company that I could find. But what I think adds to this, so like in May of 1836, there were 18 merchants registered in the county. By May of 1837, there were 32. And shortly after his downfall slide here, 1838 May, there were 45 registered merchants. I think it's fair to say that the competition kind of helped drive him out, on top of other things that were occurring there. So, obviously this is a marriage of the data from the ledger and a marriage of the data from the county's licensing department back then. So it's very interesting information. One other thing to look at when we're looking at this data is his monthly debits and credits. So the blue line, the one that goes way up here to 2,500, those are debits, right? That's the amount of people coming in purchasing stuff on credit, with cash, what have you. And then the dotted dashed line below that is the credits coming in. And if you look at this data really close, basically what is occurring is he had so many customers coming in and purchasing here in late 1836, early 1837, and he was never able to recoup from the customers, well, to get this money back. That is kind of a sticking point with this data, because if you look at it, he was pretty astute business individual, He only sued a couple people, totaling less than $100, and most of them were for notes. And only 9 people sued him for less than $200 the whole time frame. So he was pretty good. And why there's such a gap in that time frame, why he was not able to recapture that, unfortunately, at this time, he's just lost the time. But because he was not able to recoup that money financially, I think that helped drive him out quite a bit.
Were compiled by the Nazis.
Okay.
A glimpse into the lives of Deborah's relatives and hint at their fates.
What are we talking about now? Deborah's relatives? Okay, must not be related. Never mind. Okay, there's all kinds of other data here, and I just pulled a couple things here because they were key to information I was trying to nail down. The chart on the left is which day of the week was busiest, basically during his time frame here. And Monday and Saturday are the 2 busiest days. Not by much, but they obviously stick out. And what those were, I'm making this assumption. Monday is when a lot of the court cases began. So it was normal that Ottawa had a lot of people in town. So when they were in town to watch the court case or hear what's going on, they probably did some purchasing. And then Saturday, 5 days later, that was one of the days that the riverboat almost always made it up, was Saturday, during the 5-day line that went from Ottawa or LaSalle, Peru, depending on how the river was doing at that time. So there was just more people in the town at that time. So they align with those current events that are occurring in the community. So I think that is kind of indicative of more customers coming in. The chart to the right, a little bit difficult to see. In case you can't, it's $4, $4.50, $5, $5.50, $6, $6.50. So the daily purchase transaction amount was always between $6 and $5. So there was no real method here why more people bought on Thursday, while Thursday was one of the least important days. It could have been one of those that people knew Thursday not a lot of people were in, so they came in and did higher shopping at that time frame. It's speculation at this point, but it's giving you a little sense of what's occurring in Ottawa at that time. Now, during my research, there was this phrase that was used all the time: goods, wares, and merchandise. And I always wanted to know what goods, wares, and merchandise was. And I have every book that's ever been written about merchants anywhere in the United States, and it's never been defined. And I understand why when I see this. So what I did is I took every item that he sold and broke it down into this little chart here. Now, I came up with 8 categorizations: fabric and cloth making, finished clothing, consumables, kitchen items, toiletries, tools, horse-related, and miscellaneous. Anyone could look at this and say, well, you need 10 categories, you need 4 categories. I would move this to there, and that's fine. I just came up with a methodology that I could kind of get a feel for what's happening. And I'm just going to, if we look at consumables, first you'll see this 29. 29 means that Seabaugh had 29 different consumables available for purchase at his store. Now, if you go further into it, you'll see that, like sugar, it has a 2 by it. It means he had 2 types of sugar: white sugar, brown sugar, not a big, 3 different types of wine, 3 different types of fruits, what have you. So it gives you a feel. So when you jump up to like fabric making, you see 68 and you see calico, 11 different types of calico. Yeah, he had them in all kinds of different colors, patterns, what have you. And looking at some of this, when you compare this data to some of the big ads that are occurring in St. Louis, Chicago, New York at the time, he could compete with those level of stores, not wholesalers, but with merchants, because he had such a variety of that stuff coming in. And this was all stuff that was moving out. So it's kind of interesting to see what he's selling. It's also interesting to see what he's not selling. So in finished clothing, he's got coats, he's got shirts, he's got pants, the whole 9 yards. He doesn't have socks. Is that indicative that other people made socks at home? The people didn't wear socks. I honestly don't know. I don't know the clothing culture that well back then. But you can do the kind of the same thing with each one of the categories. What is he selling? What is he not selling? And then you go look at the other stores is that something that they're selling too? So calico, every merchant in LaSalle County sold calico. Even the merchants that were itinerant, that had maybe 10 or 12 customers, they were buying calico. Merino, not a lot of people were buying processed merino. So very interesting stuff here. And all this data can come together to kind of give us an understanding or a view into what is occurring in one store. And so one of the things that when I got this published, I kind of talk about was the fact that the old general store that you see, if you've ever been down to New Salem, right, where Abraham Lincoln worked, his new store, and it's very small, and it's got a couple shelves, and it's got maybe 24 items for sale. That wasn't the case in Northern Illinois by a long shot. There were other stores in other counties in Northern Illinois that were kind of similar to what Seabaugh was doing. So yes, there were those small stores, but there were also very big competitive stores that carried lots of material that was able to garner 558 individual customers in a 3-year period. So I think that is quite significant. And it alludes to the fact that the I&M Canal corridor, even though it didn't open until April 1848, was a hotbed of business transactions going on. People were pouring in from all over the nation. And what they were able to do when they settled in LaSalle, Peru, or Ottawa, or Marseilles, or Lockport, what have you, is they were able to access the same types of luxuries that they could back on the East Coast or back in Europe. So it kind of shines a spotlight on what is occurring in Northern Illinois compared to Central and Southern Illinois that were much more, they were less impressive, I guess is the best way of saying it. So when you're looking at this data in your own financial records, in your historic societies, your archives, don't be afraid to invest some time into analyzing what is occurring. Because yes, the months of data input can be kind of time consuming and horrific. I had dual screens and I had a movie on one screen and I was doing the data entry on another. But once you have it all in, you're able to process this information and present a big picture, right? And I have been, I am a professional historian. I got my PhD in American history. And when you're sitting in front of review boards and stuff like that, when they see this type of data, anything that is like questioning your methodology is doesn't exist anymore. They see the work that you put into it. They see the Excel, they see this data here, and it really solidifies whatever argument you're attempting to make for that merchant, for your community, what have you. And just goes to show that in 1836, 37, 38, Ottawa was quite the happening town. So I know that was kind of went through that kind of quickly. And so I'm happy to take any questions that you folks may have at this time. And then obviously there's my email, and I can get that back to you in the event that, you do have some further questions. Please let me know. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing So
Was
I'd be happy.
anyone, I was just saying the things, questions for Dr. Duerkes? I have a couple questions to start
Yes,
with.
ma'am. Okay.
When you were doing the transcriptions, were you scanning and converting with the tools available when you were doing them, or um, did you just simply transcribe from the ledgers at the time? Because tools, of course, have
Well,
just the last
no,
few.
and that is a great question, and I wish scanning was an option. All I was allowed to do at that individual archive was take photos. So I took 629 photos with the page, and then downloaded those off my phone onto the computer, and had that on yet a third screen blown up so that I could read everything, and it just line by line by line. And what I would do there is I would, put John Doe and his amounts, right? Now, if he bought 40 different things, that's on a whole nother spreadsheet, that, it's very hard to show that one because it's a massive spreadsheet. Um, but for the initial purposes of kind of finding out what financial operations were occurring on a local level, that's what this did. And it's not the best way of doing it, but the results turned out just fine.
Of course, just for the broader audience here, there's many tools now, more tools that do this for us,
Of
that
course.
convert to cursive and are quite advanced. And you still have to check everything because it's inconsistent. But my related question to that is, everything here is pretty much in cursive writing. Now, there is a generation that doesn't read cursive.
Yes.
When I've had that issue with my students, I've encouraged them to use ATR processes and upload it and kind of work through it. But how do you think that's going to affect how people use these materials?
I really think that is going to be problematic for the next generation coming up, where cursive is almost going to be like a foreign language. And in some of the Organization of American Historians or the American Historical Association, in those big national groups, the talk is like, do we try to push for that to become literally a foreign language, right? So that historians can take that to be able to work with these. Because if if you're a 20th century historian forward and you're looking at data from printouts, that's one thing. But so much of our data, uh, obviously 19th century and earlier, and even in the 20th century, when you get to smaller places, they did everything by hand in cursive. So, if it's just like if you wanted to study some aspect of French Illinois, if you don't read French, you're missing out on a lot. So it's the same thing with cursive. I'm very one-sided on this. I think that getting rid of cursive was a bit of a problem for the education system. But my kids, I took keyboarding in high school on an actual typewriter. They took keyboarding in like second grade. So to each their own. I think those of us who are truly loving what the research that we're doing, they're going to find a way to learn how to do that cursive. Because even you and I, we've looked at this data for a long time. Even knowing how to read cursive, sometimes it's a real problem.
It can be a challenge. You get used to the person's handwriting, and that helps as you go through.
Yes.
Does anyone else have any other questions for Dr. Duerkes? Thank you for joining us. We do appreciate it.
I do want to point out, if anyone is going to view this later on YouTube, I will always have that email address, so don't be afraid to email me 6 months from now. I love talking about this stuff.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I have one more question. I'm sorry to hog all the questions.
That's all right.
But I was looking when you're doing the various graphs, I'm just checking to see if someone's, just make sure it's not, okay. Did you have any access to the mortality tables that see if there's any relation? Say, I know they started keeping them in Illinois about 1830, but I don't know if there's any relation between what you were looking at and what was happening in the stores at all.
I couldn't really see any quick relationship between mortality and what was occurring there. My 3-county area that I was doing a comparative study, DeKalb, LaSalle, and Kendall County, the mortality data was, I feel it was missing quite a bit. DeKalb had, in 1850 had about 7,000 people, but only showed 51 people in mortality. Well, LaSalle County had 17,000 and it only showed like 32. So I really can't believe, especially with cholera coming around in 1849, that some of that data would have been in there, that it was complete. So as usual, when you're dealing with old records, you have to assess them for what you have. And sometimes, unfortunately, there's just not enough there to make connections with, but you can always glean some information from them.
Good. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening,
Have a great
folks.
night. Bye-bye.